When I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a trap popping, pocket, swola, 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 swola.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
Swola, 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 swola.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ethan Haristadoulou. Welcome back to another episode of the Greeks Gridiron. We got a pretty awesome show for you guys. There's a handful of news to go over, a lot of big things from the last few days that have gone down, or just things coming out here and there that are pointing into good direction for a lot of teams and a lot of hopes here. My cat just sprinted out of the room like a maniac. Okay. Anyways, we usually start the show with the question of the day. However, I'm going to save the question of the day for a little bit later into the show. We are going to be discussing the Panthers draft needs going into this. We're going to take a real in-depth analysis about it. Obviously, for those of you that did not hear, Dak Prescott, excuse me. I just looked at my paper and saw that name. Sam Darnold is officially a Carolina Panther. They got the Panthers decided to trade for Sam Darnold, giving up a 6th rounder, 2nd rounder, and 4th round pick, the 6th being this year and the 2nd and 4th rounders being next year. So a little bit of draft capital, bringing in what they believe would probably be the future of their team at the quarterback position going forward. Curious to see how that whole thing works out for them, and we will get into greater detail about the Panthers and everything moving forward, what their plans are in the draft a little bit later in the show. But first, a handful of just kind of like news things to go over. Some player news, stuff about Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Stephon Gilmore, some things I've been hearing about just as I've been listening to everything as we've gone through the week. So first things first, Dak Prescott came out just the other day that he is back on the field and practicing. This is pretty big news for the Dallas Cowboys, who just signed him to a 4-year, $160 million deal a few weeks back. The Dak Prescott contract thing has been a conversation in Dallas for, I want to say, the better part of what feels like the last 2 years now. It's nice for them to have that, kind of done and out of the way and not something they need to stress about anymore. So, with that, he's back. He's throwing footballs on the field. There was a video of him that came out of him throwing passes over to the right side. He's expected to be ready to go for training camp. However, the Cowboys do plan on kind of limiting what he does. Don't expect him to be full go in training camp. They want him to come back and recover as well as possible from this injury. They don't want to aggravate anything. He's had no issues so far. So really big for the Dallas Cowboys that they're going to be getting back their starting quarterback, and it looks like he'll be completely healthy and ready to go as well. Dak Prescott himself is saying that he plans on being ready, quote unquote, when it actually matters. So that sounds important or good for him. On top of that, he apparently plans to be back better than he was before. We're going to see more of the Dak Prescott that we saw early on last season before he went down with that Week 5 injury. He had 1,856 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 68% completion percentage. That yardage mark was way up compared to anyone else. I believe he was out for almost 2 weeks before the next person caught up to him in passing yards. He was a passing yards leader for a couple of weeks, even after he got hurt. 68 completion percentage. If that was to continue on throughout the year, that would have been a career best for him. So numbers were all trending upward for Dak Prescott. Great to see he's actually throwing and getting ready to get back on the field. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Cowboys are able to roll with Dak Prescott going into next season. A lot of people are excited that he's re-signed over in the Dallas area, but the big thing to remember is the offense wasn't really the problem there in Dallas. The issue is that defense. So if they can solidify a solid unit to back up Russell Wilson and all the points he's putting up for that Cowboys offense, the Cowboys are going to look pretty good. It's just a matter of, can they rework that defense and, take that roster that on paper looks great, actually be able to put up the defensive stops, the low scores that you expect them to be able to do with the names that they have on paper. With the quarterback conversation continuing on, Russell Wilson, it sounds like he's going to be in Seattle for at least this year. DN Carlos Dunlap came out the other day saying that he had a conversation with Russell Wilson, and this is from what Dunlap said specifically. He told me that he's with us and he's here to stay, and he said specifically, "Let's go Hawks." So Russell Wilson, known for ending all of his, interviews and everything with the whole "Let's go Hawks" mantra. The whole reason everyone kind of flipped out earlier in the offseason when he was kind of criticizing things going on. He wasn't ending with the "Let's go Hawks" mantra or whatever. Russell Wilson's been a very for the team type of guy. Would come forward and say what you'd expect that in support of the team. And he finally kind of spoke out about some of his displeasures this offseason. So it's good to hear that at least Seattle seems to have their quarterback situation, handled for at least another year. It sounded early on like we weren't going to see Russell Wilson in a Seahawks uniform for much longer. Obviously, the pass protection frustration is very well documented at this point. The Seahawks have started to work on that issue, though. They did bring in offensive guard Gabe Jackson from the Las Vegas Raiders, so they have at least listened and heard out Russell Wilson's displeasures and are continuing to try and do something about that. Gabe Jackson, a solid offensive lineman for the Raiders, so hopefully bringing him in helps improve some of that lackluster pass protection that has led to Russell Wilson getting sacked more times than anybody in the league since he's entered the league, by about like 30 some odd sacks. So expect them to maybe target O-linemen in the draft. I think that, Seattle's doing a good job out of the gate, kind of getting things going with bringing in Gabe Jackson. Offensive line should be their number one priority going into the draft and should be where they go but their first pick in the draft in round number 1. Depending on who, kind of how it shakes out and who falls to them, there's a really good group of offensive linemen, both interior and on the tackle position. So, if you're picking offensive linemen in the first round, and I believe the Raiders are in the higher end of those picks. I believe, what did they go, 7-9 this past season? So they shouldn't be too far. They're probably somewhere in the middle of that pack there. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what they have, but I'm sorry, I said Raiders. The Seahawks, they're going to be a little bit later in the draft. I started thinking Raiders there because of Gabe Jackson, but yeah, the Seahawks, they're picking a little bit later in the draft. There's so many good offensive linemen. They should have a good opportunity to grab somebody, but it's looking like Russell Wilson is going to be staying put, barring some unforeseen massive trade that gets done by somebody who is interested in maybe I don't know if he even would go to the Dolphins, or, the Bears were a really big front runner. They have Andy Dalton. A lot of people aren't buying the whole Andy Dalton's the number one QB thing, though. I'm kind of on the fence of, is Andy Dalton really your guy? So that's just kind of something that remains to be seen. Outside of the quarterback conversation, Stephon Gilmore. This is a guy that has been rumored to be potentially leaving the Patriots during this offseason via trade. A lot of money is owed to him. It sounded like the Patriots were, looking to move him early on just because he has 1 year left on his deal. He's owed a lot of money. He had a dip in his play last season. He wasn't quite the all-pro corner he was from a few years ago. However, the way I look at it is Stephon Gilmore's probably your best defensive player on the team. Letting him go doesn't really help anything. I understand the idea of getting something in return for him, but there's signs pointing to him not going anymore. I was listening to 98.5 The Sports Hub on my way back from work earlier, and they were talking about how Stephon Gilmore, who had his house listed for sale here in the area, pulled the listing down himself. It wasn't like the buyer that was going to grab his house pulled out or anything. He himself pulled the listing out. And on top of that, Michael Lombardi has been on record talking about, Patriots moves and things like that a lot. He's really big, within the organization there. He knows a lot of the ins and outs and what's going on there. And it sounds like he doesn't really expect the Patriots to be moving him as well. So signs are really starting to point towards Stephon Gilmore being there for at least another season. Whether that ends up holding true or not kind of remains to be seen. But I think personally, if I was, to throw my opinion out there, I think that the Patriots sticking with Stephon Gilmore, probably the way to go. I don't see how it really benefits them trading somebody like Stephon Gilmore, who, just over a season ago was, literally one of the best cornerbacks in the league, if not the best cornerback in the league. Gilly Lock, the nickname, it's there for a reason. He's a very good corner when completely healthy. So if he can return to form, or even get, halfway there, or like 3/4 of the way there from his defensive MVP form, I don't see any reason why the Patriots should move on from him. Maybe they work out a deal that's for a little less money than what people were expecting him to get paid for. I think if they stick it out this year and his play continues to decline or isn't just quite the level of what it was from a couple of years ago, they could restructure him or re-sign him for maybe like another year or two on a slightly cheaper deal than what people would expect him to get paid if they re-signed him right now. I think that's probably the best route to go. Keep the defense as strong as possible. You brought in so many good players this offseason to really retool the entire team from top to bottom, offense and defense at this point. So I think it'd be a mistake if the Patriots just outright let him go or traded him away for, some future draft pick, whatever it may be. I don't think that really helps him out in the long run. Someone like Stephon Gilmore, I think, has a few good years left in him. Maybe not quite what the level he was at, but at least a handful of years left where even if, they keep him for another 2 or 3 years, he'll be playing at worst like a solid number 2 corner. And someone like J.C. Jackson, if he continues to emerge the way he has, can take that number 1 starting role for them. Outside of that, Trevor Lawrence, news came out about him earlier, I believe yesterday, or today rather. What is today? The 8th? I think it was today. Trevor Lawrence has begun throwing again. He had surgery on his not his throwing shoulder, it is now April 8th. So about roughly 2 months ago. It was back on February 16th when he had the surgery. So roughly 2 months ago. This is an injury that, he's been dealing with for a very long time through Clemson, from what it sounds like, from all the reading that I've been doing about the injury. This is not something that is affecting his draft stock or anything like that. It was a minor procedure just to kind of fix an issue. Again, this is non-throwing shoulder, so left shoulder, not an issue for him there. Nothing really to, sit there and hold your breath on or anything like that. It sounds like the rehab is going really well. He's already throwing, so that's really good. 2 months out from surgery. He's back throwing the football, getting comfortable with his workouts again. It sounds like he's on track to be ready to go for, training camp, preseason, all that stuff, if there even ends up being a training camp. For those of you that didn't know, the NFL and NFLPA are kind of hashing out exactly what's going to happen with this offseason. Nobody really knows exactly yet because the NFLPA and a lot of players really want to do the whole virtual offseason thing that they did last year, but I know that owners and teams want to get their players back in the building this offseason, especially the rookies that are coming in this year. You don't want to have the kind of what almost felt like sort of slow and sloppy start to the league last year. Oh, perfect timing. I'm going to go ahead and pull this in real quick. So today we are bringing in a guest. Looks like I'm going to be jumping in here right now. I had mentioned the other day during, I think this was last Thursday, I had mentioned we were going to be bringing on new members to the team, and I'm very excited to be doing so. I brought in Nick Cormier, who was he was a part of a special that came out on Tuesday, at the day after the Sam Darnold news broke of him going to the Panthers. I'm also bringing on board to be a more regular to the show, Eli Bieberman. He was here for a couple of different things that we had. A couple of shows, like I think it was leading into the Super Bowl and maybe the post Super Bowl, something like that. It was a couple of months ago, but I'm excited to have them joining the team and be a more, solid part of the group. I feel like the one-man show thing is fun, but nothing is more fun than talking with friends and, things like that, and being able to hash out conversations with more than just one person. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to throw my headphones on here. I don't think Eli can see me yet. I'm going to put me on right there, start my video. He should be able to see me now. And go ahead, talk for me real quick. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And I'm going to pull you right up on the screen now. Welcome to the show, Eli. Well, welcome back to the show, actually.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's been a while, but I'm excited to get right back into football. A lot of exciting stuff going on right now.
Oh, yeah, of course. A lot of exciting things going on. So first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of just jump right into it because pretty big stuff has gone on this past week, and I think it's affected a lot of what's going to be done with the Panthers going into the draft and how they kind of prepare for next season. So with the question of the day first, we'll shoot this with you guys. Now that the Panthers have traded for the quarterback, Sam Darnold, did they make the right move? Was it a smart decision? I want to know what you guys think. So for anyone that's watching, you let me know what you think. Did the Panthers make a smart move? Is it the right choice going for Sam Darnold at the quarterback position? So as far as a rundown for it goes, I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show. They traded a 6th rounder this year, a 2nd rounder, and a 4th rounder next year. So you have a couple of different picks going to them next year, and then the 6th rounder this year, which really won't amount to much for the Jets, more just like depth rotational guys, if anything, if they don't even use it to trade to something else. let me ask you, Eli. I'll kind of throw the question out to you. What are your thoughts just on that move?
Honestly, I thought it was a home run from pretty much every angle you look at it. Sam Darnold is definitely a guy coming out of college. People saw the potential in him. He didn't have the most stellar college career, but uh, he has all the arm talent you could ever want in a quarterback. He's able to make pretty much every throw. But he was really in an awful situation with the Jets. They had issues stemming from the front office, head coaching, offensive coordinator. They didn't have weapons around him. So it was really just a mess.
A literal dumpster fire. I think that's a fair way to call that.
Oh, absolutely. But now in Carolina, he'll have the opportunity, the best opportunity he's had to succeed. You've got arguably the best running back in the game right now in Christian McCaffrey with him. You have really solid wide receiver core. Robbie Anderson, who he has the familiarity with coming from the Jets system, as well as DJ Moore, I think is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. Then from there, you have definitely some pieces to build off of as well. Like they got some really nice guys in the draft last year, and Derek Brown and Jeremy Chin to really solidify that defense for the next generation. So this is definitely a team on the rise. This is definitely a great situation for him to go into. Plus, I don't think it gets talked about enough. The Panthers really didn't give up a massive haul for him. A second, fourth,
Oh,
and a
not
sixth.
at all.
Yeah. So even if he comes in, he has a terrible year, and you stink next year, you're still in a great position because you own your own draft pick next year. So if there's a quarterback you like next year, I know Sam Howell's out of North Carolina is a name that's being thrown around. Obviously, way, way too early for top of the draft consideration, but he's had a great career down in North Carolina. So you're really in a great position to kind of see what you have in him, give him a full offseason. You don't have to start him right away because you still do have Teddy Bridgewater, who played his heart out last year despite not having the best numbers, but you're in a really good position if you're Carolina. And with this 8th pick, you have a lot of different options you can go to.
Definitely.
If a guy like Penei Sewell falls to you at 8th, I think that's immediate. You have to snap him up right now because no matter who your quarterback is, you need to protect him. You have a bunch of different offensive weapons. You have a guy like Kyle Pitts who could fall to you at 8.
That's who I'm picking for them. I really think they should go Kyle Pitts. I know that they have some offensive line needs, but man, if Kyle Pitts is sitting there at number 8, I really feel like Sewell's gonna go. He's got to go to the Bengals, right? They need offensive line, but then I heard the Eagles traded down because they thought that they were taking Jamar Chase, which I understand you want weapons for Burrow, but Burrow can't throw the ball if he's not protected.
No, exactly. I think it's hard with Joe Burrow obviously playing Jamar Chase had all that success with him. Apparently he's been lobbing the Cincinnati front office extremely hard to bring him in. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Jamar Chase go at 5. Other than that, I think it's down to Chase or Sewell. And no matter what happens at 6, Miami is going to take probably either Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase. So you figure the wide receivers aren't going to fall to Carolina at 8. So basically, I think it's going to be down to Pitts or Sewell at 8. Whoever Cincinnati doesn't take, because at 7, that's Detroit. I think they're a prime candidate to trade down in this draft. Maybe if somebody starts slipping. Maybe if a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance starts slipping a little bit more than anticipated, maybe we see somebody trade up with Detroit. But even if you're Carolina, what you can do is you could honestly take a slipping quarterback too. Like if a Justin Fields, maybe teams don't fall in love with him. Maybe he falls and he's still available at 8. Maybe he's still available at 8. So you snap him up at 8 and you maybe give Sam Darnold a shot, but
oh my God! You think that they would go quarterback though after giving up the compensation? On top of that, they took his 5th-year option too, so they added that as well. So you're committed to Darnold for 2 years and almost $20 million next year, I believe, is somewhere around that ballpark. I forget what the exact number is. That's a commitment to Sam Darnold. You think they would? I mean, I guess if Justin Fields slips to them at 8, maybe if they're not sold.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, we see around the league that the timer on quarterbacks is a lot shorter than it used to be. You used to be able to give them 2, 3, 4 years before you really decided what you want to do with them. But great example, we saw what happened with Josh Rosen. Arizona gave up on him after 1 year, and his career has kind of been in the tube ever since then. He's been bouncing around practice squad to practice squad. So the time around quarterbacks really isn't what you used to. Sam Darnold, since he's been in the league, has the worst QBR of any starting quarterback in these past 3 seasons. So it's not like he's had a great career up to it. So I feel like if Carolina had a chance to draft somebody, maybe they fell in love with Fields earlier in the draft process, but knew, especially with San Francisco trading up, that they wouldn't be able to get him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes and what's going on in that Carolina meeting room.
Oh yeah, I'm really curious to see how it shakes out. So I'm just going to kind of rattle off a couple of names here so we can get a good idea as to like where the Panthers are going into this draft right now. So some notable losses, and the way I kind of have been breaking down teams is a notable loss I would consider is somebody on the team that has played at least like 60% of the snaps or more. That's somebody who is a starter. They're on the field for at least like, 2 or 3 downs every single set of 4. So the way I see it, Chris Reed from the left guard, he's gone. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver. There's a couple of other people they lost, but those are like the 2 big guys that were at that 60% plus mark. Everyone else is anywhere from like 30% or less. That they're more rotational. They were nothing. The Panthers didn't really absorb any massive losses. Like Curtis Samuel is probably the biggest loss there. And whether you argue Chris Reed or not, I mean the Panthers' offensive line wasn't terrific last year, so you could kind of argue that the loss isn't as big as the name might sound. As far as signings go for them, they picked up edge rusher Hassan Reddick. He brings in 12.5 sacks for the team, which is great because pass rush was a huge position of need for them. And they got somebody who's coming off a career year at this point, and it looks like Hassan Reddick's just trending upwards. So I'm excited for this pick for them. This should help really improve the defense. Obviously, quarterback Sam Darnold, we just talked about that. They brought in wide receiver David Moore, which I think really helps just solidify the case that Darnold should be good in Carolina, because you have DJ Moore, David Moore himself, 35 catches, 417 yards, 6 touchdowns. Those are solid numbers for a receiver if he's just playing the number 3 role. And then you also have Robbie Anderson, like you mentioned earlier, somebody he played with on the Jets. You have Christian McCaffrey, who, as long as he's 100% healthy and ready to go and playing at full speed, that's a really good offense. And then on top of that, they also just recently signed, and this was literally yesterday, I think, is when they announced it officially, cornerback AJ Bouye from the Broncos. I'm curious about that signing because he played 7 games last year, allowed a career high 65.7% completion percentage when thrown at him, and also a career high 108.4 passer rating allowed. Bouye has been regressing since that year 1 with Jacksonville when he had 6 interceptions and they had that really solid defense when Jalen Ramsey and Bouye were playing on both sides. I don't really know if this fills a position in need for them, because the needs that I have listed, and let me know what you think about this. I have tight end, offensive lineman, linebacker, and then I question mark cornerback now because they signed Bouye. When I was planning for this, I was going to talk about corners, but they have Bouye now, so I don't know if that really fills that position of need or not. I'm curious what you think, though. Am I missing anything on that as far as team needs are concerned? I think those are the 4 positions that you could really kind of narrow down and look at the most.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Those are probably the 4 biggest needs they have. The thing is, losing a left guard isn't as severe an issue. Like, obviously, you don't want to lose any offensive lineman, especially when you didn't have a great offensive line to begin with. Continuity is a huge issue. But in this draft, you could see a couple guys going at the top of that second round where they're picking. So I think they can address that. Like, you can get a guy like Jalen Mayfield out of Oklahoma. Maybe a guy like Alex Leatherwood, who's a fringe first-round pick, but will definitely be early second-round pick. So there are definitely some guys who can make an impact on the offensive line if you don't grab Sewell in the first round. But as for the other positions of need, being such a young team, I don't think there's any position that they're solidly like, oh, we don't need this at all. Maybe that's receiver. They have 2 solid options of Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, and obviously bringing in David Moore, a veteran who's been around with Seattle for a couple of years, played really well with Russell Wilson. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey has some injury issues, only played 3 games last year, even though he played out of his mind in those 3 games. Having a guy on the field is important, and you lose a guy like Mike Davis. So having a guy to be able to having another running back to help them out in case McCaffrey does go down, or even just to manage his load. Like, you have a guy who missed all that time, not being able to put a productive running back on the field, especially for a quarterback who you're trying to develop in Sam Darnold. It really hurts them a lot. So we could maybe see him grab one of the combo backs in the second round. Chuba Hubbard is someone I'm interested in. That would be a good fit for him. He was a workhorse in college, did everything for Oklahoma State, was one of the most productive running backs in the country, but draft stock, obviously he's got a lot of tread on the tires, and that seems to worry some teams, but I think he could be a guy we could see the second or third round. That could be a guy that Carolina could target as well, take some of that off of McCaffrey, just be another guy they could plug in to be another talented running back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of like break down, and I like some of those mentions. I want to talk about the first 2 rounds specifically, because I think that those first 2 round picks that they have, and because they're so high, are going to be a really like almost like a deciding factor in how good this team plays out. So when we look at the body of work that Carolina had last year, they were 5-11. We're now extending to a 17-game season. So they lost 8 games by 1 score or less. It seems like the Panthers are in a position where they feel like they're like this close. Like they have a team that's really good. Whether it's the quarterback play was the issue, maybe it was the lack of pass rush, and they've kind of resolved that issue with Reddick. I think that these first 2 rounds are going to be really big for them. I want to say it's more so the offense than it was the defense that are issues, which is why I kind of prioritize, like in that order, tight end, O-line, linebacker, corner as the more positions of need. Let's talk about kind of just like the key players. So I'm assuming Sewell goes to the Bengals when I make this option, or when I make this choice for them. They either got to go Kyle Pitts or Rashawn Slater in the first round. They need they have Moten that's going to be playing tackle for them, but they need another tackle on the opposite side of him. I'm thinking first round's probably going to be someone like Kyle Pitts or Rashawn Slater. And then I think as far as tight end offensive line goes, whatever you don't select in that first round, you need to target in the second round. I think those are the 2 real glaring holes at the team. Like you said, they're a really young team, so there's no real position you can say isn't for them. But, I would say that those 2 are the most glaring. For the second round, I really like Pat. I think his name's pronounced Freiermuth from Penn State, 6'5", 260. He's not afraid to put his head down. I was watching some clips from him earlier before the show, and dude, that guy, he reminds me of Rob Gronkowski. And then funny enough, I was going through like PFF's grading of him and stuff like that, and they actually called him a poor man's Rob Gronkowski, because I mean the dude's tall, he's big, he will literally lower his head and run somebody over. They had some really good clips of just some plays he's made. So I think that if they go Slater in the first round, they should definitely take a look at him if he's there in the second round. I feel like this draft, not a lot of teams are really targeting tight ends that I can think of off the top of my head. I think Kyle Pitts has the potential to fall to 8th, and if he doesn't go 8th, he might fall a little bit further than that if like the Panthers don't go tight end. So I think someone like Freiermuth might be around in that second round early pick for them to grab. And then if they go Kyle Pitts in the first round and they need an offensive lineman, I really like Kenrick Green from Illinois. He tied the Power 5 for lead with 14 big time blocks, not tackles, big time blocks. PFF graded him 87.8. Really big dude. I believe his numbers were 6'5", 315. So massive man. He has the strength, the ability to bulldoze somebody over. I really like him as well. I'm curious who you would probably give them in those first couple of rounds, though, if it's not any of the guys that I just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think basically it's down to Pitts. If Pitts is there and Sewell doesn't fall to them, I think they're going to take Pitts. But a name I kind of want to mention, because you mentioned linebacker as one of their needs, a guy like Micah Parsons out of Penn State. The dude flies around the field. He's a very modern-day linebacker. That's sideline to sideline, can play all 4 downs, can cover better than the average linebacker. He's not a small guy. He's about 6'3", 245, so he's definitely a big, broad-shouldered guy. But the things he's capable of doing around the field, he could be that next generation of Carolina linebacker. I know Carolina, one of the younger franchises in the league, but they've been well known for their linebackers. You see guys like Thomas Davis having potentially Hall of Fame careers. And you see guys like Luke Kuechly, who fortunately his career was a little shorter than we would have liked, but the dude could play as well as any linebacker in league history. But linebackers are a very important part of what Carolina does. So I could see a guy like Micah Parsons realistically going at 8 to Carolina. The biggest issue people have with him is one, he opted out last year. So that could definitely play a part in it. That may make him slide a little bit. He may be available later in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
He may even fall to the second round. I doubt he will because he's far and away the best linebacker. And another,
I was just gonna say. So, would you say him in the first round? Is that what you're going if they don't go Kyle Pitts or Penei Sewell, or are you saying he would maybe if he slipped into the second round to them?
I would say in the first round, he's definitely an option. He has the talent to go top 10 and even top 5. But again, with him not playing last year, probably wouldn't have helped either way because Penn State was awful.
I'm really curious to see, like, with the people that didn't play last year, how much that actually affects people in that drafting process. If they shy away from taking somebody that in any other draft would be literally a top 5 pick, or if they're just not going to care that, the tape is there, a year off isn't going to kill somebody at such a young age. I'm really curious to see how that affects people.
Yeah, no, it's a great point because you see a guy like Jamar Chase, that conversation doesn't even get brought up. He didn't play at all last year, opting out, but everyone says he's not falling past 6 because Miami apparently loves him even more than Devontae Smith, with Devontae Smith obviously being not a big guy. Me and him weigh about the same. He's about 170, so Devontae Smith's a very small guy, but his production in college was insane. I could also realistically see Carolina taking a wide receiver that falls to them, maybe like if Devontae Smith is there at 8, if Jalen Waddle's there at 8, having a guy like Jalen Waddle running around with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore would be a nightmare to try.
That'd be quite a receiver group if they do run wide receiver. That's like something where I've thought maybe they could go wide receiver, but I felt like because of the move they made bringing in David Moore, they might shy away from that. But I mean, you're not wrong. So if they brought in somebody like Jalen Waddle, I kind of like Jalen Waddle more than Devontae Smith just because of the size thing. I don't know how that's valued with the NFL teams, but I don't know. Like the size thing kind of scares me because 170 is small. It's very small. So I don't want to say very small, but like I don't know. It's just like when I think of a NFL wide receiver, you're probably, unless you're like 5'6", 5'7", and you're one of those smaller guys, 5'8", 170 is just very small for somebody as tall as Devontae Smith is. I think that's crazy. I like that though, wide receiver. So you think that they may take a wide receiver?
I don't think it's out of the question. We see it worked out great with a team like Dallas last year, who we know they didn't need a receiver coming in the draft with Gallup and Cooper on the outside. But they ended up taking CeeDee Lamb, and it was a home run for them, even with insert name here playing at quarterback last year for Dallas Cowboys. I could have been you if you asked nice enough. We saw the wide receivers were still extremely productive. Cooper had a decent year. Gallup had a decent year, and CeeDee Lamb. So the NFL, the modern day NFL, is more about getting the ball deep, getting the ball down the field, having multiple receivers who can do a lot of things. So we see a team like Kansas City that's basically built a track team out there. These aren't like the biggest and the baddest receivers, but they're running by people. They're beating people on in-cutting routes. Kelsey taking up space in the middle of the field. That seems to be the modern day philosophy in the NFL. Like get guys who can burn down the sidelines and have a tight end soak up the middle, which seems to be what the Patriots were doing this offseason. Yeah. Bringing in the 2 tight ends, obviously. And then bringing in speedy guys like a guy like Nelson Aguilar, who's been known as a deep threat the entire career. And then a more possession type of guy like Kendrick Bourne. So the NFL's changing. It's an offensive-centered game, and it's speed. That's why I get to see a guy like Micah Parsons, because he is that fast, modern NFL linebacker that can play sideline to sideline and keep up with these fast guys.
I'm curious to see how that shakes out. You bring up a really good point with that. It feels like some linebackers are getting a little bit smaller and a lot of bit faster is what it feels like. And then you see a team like Tennessee who's switched to a refrigerator at running back, and now he's just starting to bulldoze teams for 2,000 yards. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I could definitely see what you mean with the Parsons pick now, though. I like that. Now, what about somebody like a little bit later? If you were to target somebody maybe specifically in that second round, if like, let's say, Parsons is off the board, all those first round guys you'd expect to kind of be gone. What's somebody you would look at there?
I think it's interesting to see because there are a lot of offensive line prospects that I'm very interested to see what happens with them. I could see a big run on them in the first round where we could see guys like Landon Dickerson out of Alabama and Alex Leatherwood also out of Alabama sneaking into that first round, even though they're considered fringe first-round picks. Again, with the offenses doing what they do now, being so dynamic and trying to be more inclusive. So I could see an offensive lineman sneaking into the first round, but there's a chance like somebody could slip in the second round. Maybe somebody doesn't do as well in the physical traits as a team would have liked, but I could see Carolina grabbing somebody in the second round. But from there, they kind of have the world as their oyster kind of view to this. They can really pick whoever they want. They don't really have anything that's going to be a luxury pick, because even their positions that they're strong on, they could definitely still use some depth. Like cornerback, they could definitely grab some corners. We're going to see a lot of cornerbacks going in the middle of the draft, like the J.C. Horns and the Caleb Farleys. Maybe one of them slips. Maybe Caleb Farley has an injury concern, but I definitely see offensive tackle. So maybe a guy like Jalen Mayfield, like
Asante Samuel Jr. maybe.
Asante
Samuel Jr., Mr. Pick Six's son.
I could see him falling there too. I think that'd be a really good home for him. We see Sons doing well. Like we saw Anton Winfield Jr. make a huge difference in Tampa Bay last year on the championship team. So
the football genes run through the family.
Ball runs deep.
I definitely agree. Cornerback is definitely an interesting. That's like one of those things where I really looked at it as a position of need, and then they went and signed Bouye. And when I looked into Bouye, I felt like I had heard a lot of negative things about him the last couple of years. So I don't know if that fills that position or not. And like I don't think I saw anything about money that he was given, but I wonder what the thought process is behind that. If they're going to put him as like a number 2, or if he's more of a depth guy at number 3 and they do go corner in the draft. I don't know, especially because he's putting up career highs in all the wrong categories. So I don't know how that works out for them. Cornerback is definitely a position I think they need to look at. I think it might be slightly lesser down on the totem pole, at least in their opinion, because of who they just brought in, but very curious to see where that goes. I think that about wraps up everything I wanted to go over for the Panthers. I guess since I have you on here, couple of draft things that came up here, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts on them are. I was reading this literally right before the show got started, and I threw it in the last second on my notes here. Apparently, so the Falcons are open to trading the number 4 pick. I don't know if you heard about that, but I just read something that the Bengals are actually fielding offers, but won't get greedy on trading the number 5 pick. The quote unquote won't get greedy actually came from them. Do you think that they really trade down from the number 5 spot?
Well, with this year, with the quarterback situation, we could realistically see if Cincinnati does trade out of that number 5 spot, we could realistically see quarterbacks going 1 through 5. Sounds crazy. It sounds out there, but I wouldn't be shocked given the way the league's going, where you have to have a good quarterback to be able to compete. Like we see, like in Denver, all the rumors that Denver is apparently trying to trade up as well, grab one of the quarterbacks when you have Drew Lock, who's only going to be a third-year guy. Flashed some potential, has also shown some poor decision-making skills, but it's just a really interesting scenario. I could see Cincinnati trading out, especially when you have a draft like this where you do have some second-tier offensive tackle prospects, like a Rashawn Slater could be available to you at, let's say you trade back with Denver. Denver has the 11th pick?
Something like that. They're pretty high up there.
They're pretty high up there, but we could see a team like that. You switch with Denver, then all of a sudden you could see a Rashawn Slater fall to you. You could see somebody like
Christian Darrisaw's up there as well. I want him to go to Indianapolis, so let's hope he does not get picked up by them. I want him in Indy. We need an offensive tackle to replace Costanzo, and that's who I have the Colts taking if he's there. Because I feel like Slater and Sewell are going to be gone, so I feel like the only plausible choice would be Darrisaw, and I really like Darrisaw's game. I think he's a mean dude.
Yeah, no, Christian Darrisaw may even have the biggest potential in this draft. I think he may even have more potential than Sewell, but he's also a little bit more raw than the other two. He's this big mauling guy.
Yeah.
So I'm to see how he turns out. If he gets in a good situation, I think he could do really well. But also, if you trade back, that's when you start seeing the more defensive guys, their names start coming up. So like your cornerbacks, your J.C. Horns, your Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. Then you also see the linebackers that we can talk about, like your Jeremiah Owusu Karamoa.
I think it's Koromoa. I think it's Koromoa. I've said that name a few times in a couple of draft conversations I've had. That's quite the name he's got there.
Right. Now, he's really talented. I enjoyed watching him play at Notre Dame. Obviously, with Notre Dame getting in the Final Four again this year, it was really fun to watch him. He's a really talented guy. Another more modern-day linebacker, can move all around the field and hits pretty hard too. So then we also see a bunch of different weapons that are going to be available in that second tier of guys. That's where you see your Rashad Bateman types, maybe even a running back. We see Cincinnati losing a guy, cutting Giovanni Bernard. So we could potentially see him maybe in the category for a Travis Etienne or a Najee Harris, the elite tier of the running backs, especially with Joe Mixon. His contract doesn't have too much long on it. So maybe we could see them draft a running back, play with a 2 running back, and then once Joe Mixon's contract's up, you move on to the next guy.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I was really surprised when I saw that. I mean, because I know that the Falcons are kind of open to moving it, and it sounds like, they're not interested in the quarterback market like some people initially thought they would be. I never really bought into that hype. I just thought that, you have Matt Ryan, you have Julio Jones. Granted, they're a little bit older, but the way quarterbacks have been playing for the length of time, it seems like, Matt Ryan could be around for at least like another 5 years. And I think he's playing still at a really high level. And the offense isn't the problem over in Atlanta. The defense is the issue. So them trading back, collecting, even if they get 2 draft picks out of that this year, maybe they pull in like a third or something like that on top of a later first round, whatever it is that they decide to do. I just would be shocked for them to be going after a quarterback. It just doesn't make sense to me with defense being the issue. And they lost somebody like Keanu Neal it just doesn't make sense for them to go after a quarterback in this draft. I could see the Bengals moving though. I guess now that you put it into that light though, I like the idea of them moving back because realistically, if Denver really wants a quarterback, that's 4. And then who else would be another team that's really looking to get a quarterback that would move up right now? I'm trying to think. I don't see Chicago doing it. They have Andy Dalton now, and they seems like they're riding that out. I don't know who would take that 5th spot, but it seems very, very likely we get maybe even 4 quarterbacks going 1 through 4. Like I could see something like that happen. And then if somehow the Bengals find somebody else that wants a quarterback, yeah, I mean, because that pushes the draft back so much. Like if you think about that, if quarterbacks go the top 5 picks, that like sifts down such a huge group of players that would normally be top 5 picks, and they're going to end up going maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, or even like 11, 12, 13, 14. That'd be very interesting to see how that goes, because that means a lot of big time players that you didn't expect to fall to teams are going to end up falling to teams. Let me ask you this. What do you think of the whole quarterback thing going on right now with this year's draft? Because going into this offseason, I didn't think of this class as that strong, but now it seems like everyone seems to think that. And I don't know. I mean, the pro days have looked good, but it was just weird because it felt like it was, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. And now suddenly it's like Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, maybe Mac Jones, then Justin Fields or Trey Lance. Like I don't know where that whole thing just came from.
I think a big part of it too is the second group. After you get past these top 5, it's not really a whole lot of guys that are viewed as elite quarterback prospects.
Yeah.
Probably the best in that group is like a Kyle Trask kind of guy, maybe a Jamie Newman out of Wake Forest, or Wake Forest by way of Georgia. But after those top 5, there's not a really whole lot. And a lot of teams we see have really talented cores, but are just missing that quarterback. Especially with the way the past couple drafts have gone. Like we see teams a lot closer than people think. Like for example, right at the top of the draft, we have San Francisco, who just traded up to number 3. They're very close. They're a talented team. They have a guy like George Kittle, you have a guy like Brandon Ayuk, and then you have a good running back in Raheem Mostert. So you have weapons. You still have a solid defense, even with your defensive coordinator leaving to go coach the Jets. They still have a very solid defense, and you're getting a guy like Nick Bosa back. So getting a quarterback in there in that system to learn with Jimmy Garoppolo could just ensure that they're going for the next X amount of years. Like you get a guy like, I think it's down to Mac Jones or Justin Fields is what I'm hearing for the San Francisco's pick, with Mac Jones slightly in the lead.
Yeah, but it sounds like Kyle Shanahan's really, really big on Mac Jones.
No. So you see those guys bringing in a guy like that, having him sit for a little bit behind Jimmy Garoppolo, and then working him in could just ensure that you're competitive for the next 5-6 years. And we see the Patrick Mahomes effect, that we see everyone needs a dominant quarterback to be able to keep up with him, because no one in the AFC seems to be in the same league as him. Obviously, teams are getting better each year, but nobody in the AFC. The second best team in the AFC, maybe Baltimore, maybe Indianapolis, maybe could be a bunch of different teams. But the reality of the situation is teams aren't really going to be able to compete with Kansas City unless they have that offense that can really change it. Like we see a team like Tennessee with that dominant running back in Derrick Henry who can completely disrupt a game, and even they couldn't compete with Kansas City. We saw a couple of years ago when they met in the championship game. Tennessee was up early on them, and then Patrick Mahomes turned it on. There was just nothing they could do. They just couldn't come back on them. But we see other teams jockeying for position to try to get that next, even if it's not the next Patrick Mahomes, it could be the next solid starting quarterback that's going to get you through the next generation.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I also feel like it's partially with like some of the way quarterbacks have moved this offseason that are already in the league. It really feels like a whole fire has been lit under people to get that quarterback, and you made a good point with the whole Kansas City, can they compete with Kansas City type deal? Because you basically need somebody who, when it's the fourth quarter and Patrick Mahomes has 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, or if it's Tom Brady and the Bucks with 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, because we know how good both those offenses are, you need to be able to have somebody who can also throw for 400 yards but 5 touchdown passes, And I feel like there's a big pressure on the entire league right now to figure something out like that. And like the quarterbacks moving, like Matthew Stafford going to LA, that offense can be really good, I feel, with Matthew Stafford. The Colts with Frank Reich and Carson Wentz being brought back together, I think that could go really well, especially if Carson Wentz, I feel like there was a little bit too much hype in the whole, like, oh, he needs to be babied and blah, blah, blah. I just think it was the whole organization in Philadelphia was not doing him right, and that was a really big problem. So, and we have all seen what Philadelphia looks like now. So I'm kind of excited to see how things shake out. At first, as a Colts fan, I was kind of like, I don't really know about Carson Wentz. I wanted Matthew Stafford, but it's definitely interesting to see the way quarterbacks have moved. And like Tom Brady's a good example last year. Like I feel like the last 2 years, a lot of quarterbacks have rotated, and we've seen it kind of work in favor of those teams that rotated the quarterbacks, because Tampa Bay won a Super Bowl bringing in Tom Brady. Phillip Rivers brought the Colts to the playoffs. Ryan Fitzpatrick almost led the Dolphins to a playoff berth. If every single team wasn't 11-5 or better in the AFC, they could have made the playoffs as well. So yeah, the pressure's definitely on. Oh man, I'm excited to see how this whole quarterback thing shakes out, because I did not expect 5 quarterbacks going 1 through 5, and it really seems like there's a strong possibility with that. But that's all I got. That's pretty much it for the show. I didn't really have anything else to talk about. That draft stuff I was going to talk about before you got on, but you called me a little bit before I was expecting you to. So that is just about everything I have for the show. I really hope that this doesn't look terrible. Something I didn't mention as this entire show is going on is that my streaming platform is telling me right now that there's been a poor connection, but I don't understand why. And it's telling me I've been dropping frames, so I can't wait to see how bad this might look. But I hope it at least sounds really good. That's all I want. As long as it sounds good, that's all I need. I appreciate you coming on, Eli. I appreciate everyone who sat there and watched through and listened in on the topics of discussion that we had. Eli's going to be on more frequently now. Like I said, I'm trying to make this more of a multi-man show. Me monologuing to the screen is fun and all, but it's great to have conversation and pick the minds of other people who love the sport of football just as much as I do. So be sure to check out all our socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We are literally on everything. So if you're listening to the show somewhere, you can catch us on all the social medias at the Greeks Gridiron for literally everything. But I'm Ethan. To my left here is Eli. Your right is Eli. Thank you all for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and have a good Thursday afternoon.
Thank you so much.